So this session is really much about the customer view. What does the resident think, and what are the most important things to those customers? And what we've got in here is a couple of people. So just to introduce myself, I'm Graham Sibley from the UKA. We've got two people here, Dan and Rory, who I'll let them introduce themselves, but absolutely got some great insights and themes into what's important to customers today and into the future. So we're going to have just a session of around half an hour to explore some of those themes that have come from MRI's research and also HomeView's own insights and deep dives to understand those. So first off, I'll ask you to introduce yourself and where you're coming, how you're coming at this from.
Yeah, of course. I'm Dan Foroszewski, Sales Director at MRI. We are the largest property software house in EMEA and in the UK residential sector, supporting the management of about 3 million units across leasehold, build to rent and social housing. I'm coming at this very much from a systems perspective in terms of my knowledge, but also armed with a bit of research that we did on a tenant survey across both the buy-to-let residential and build-to-rent residential tenant sector.
Hi everyone, I'm Rory Kramer, I'm CEO of HomeViews. We are the resident review site for new homes, but we have particular coverage. I think on last count, we're over 95% of all completed build-to-rent stock in the UK have reviews on HomeViews. I'm going to attempt to show you on HomeViews Pro, which is our new data product, some of the feedback that you're able to access through the data we've created. A total of 39,000 resident reviews now across 2,300 buildings in the UK. Can give you a really accurate feel on what people enjoy, what they want more of, and also some interesting intakes, particularly around sustainability, which is one of the things we're going to pick up today.
Thank you both, and actually we'll dive straight in on. Dan, you've recently published some really insightful research into customer views, and one of the key things I think we'd like to dive in and talk about is how important ESG and green credentials are to residents in their views and their choices of where they want to live.
Yeah, so obviously we spoke a lot about ESG today. I don't know if any residents necessarily know what the life cycle costing of their building is, but maybe in a few years that might be a prerequisite. What we found in our research was about 70% of renters believe that both green technologies and also green credentials of their landlord were an important decision when they were making a decision on where to rent. And also firming that up a little bit more, 47% of them actually said that it was a deal breaker as to whether they'd move into a development or not.
And that's a big stat, I think, for us. And one thing, should I jump on?
Please do.
Live demo. I love watching other people do a live demo.
This may or may, I've got my head of products in the room, Grace. So if anything goes wrong, I may. So HomeViews Pro basically allows. HomeViews Pro, we have a number of partners who are utilising this: architects, planning advisors, investors, developers. Not sure what's happening with that, guys. Have we got it? One of the questions we ask is, are environmentally sustainable features important to you? And what HomeViews Pro, is that coming up? Or?
I think it's the HDMI in your laptop just being a bit full.
Okay, let's see if this works. And if it doesn't, guys, I can talk you through it. But what I can do is I can actually select build to rent, and then I can actually split. So the question we ask is, are environmentally sustainable features of your home important to you? And so I've selected just build to rent. I'm going to break this down by age group. So what we have here is all of the build to rent tenants that have left reviews on HomeViews. I think we have about 16,000. The ones that have answered, are sustainable features important to you, broken down by age. One of the things you can see is, as you get older, sustainability becomes more important to you. That might be slightly counterintuitive. You'd expect the younger generation to think it's more important. Actually, from the qualitative feedback we get in the reviews, the younger generation really cares about affordability. And for them, sustainability is a factor, but it's something that it isn't right at the forefront of their mind. And actually, this statistic on age group is mirrored for owners as well. One of the other factors of this question is what feature of your home is most important to you. So here, So you've answered yes, environmentally sustainable features are important to me, and then you can select a group of features. So we've got renewable energy, recycling, built environmental ratings, energy saving measures. I know we've got someone from BRE here, which is interesting, but one thing you can do is actually benchmark this against build to sell. So how does the build to rent tenant feedback change against owners? And what we see is really interesting, because actually build to rent tenants really care about recycling. It's probably one of the things that has the least impact on getting to net. It's really important, don't get me wrong, but to get to net zero, the sector really has to focus on, I think, getting the importance of building environmental accreditations, sustainable construction methods. 8.1% care about that, whereas recycling people touch and feel every day. It's part of, and I think that and it's about education in recycling. You're kind of aware. And interestingly, we showed these statistics. So this is for all build-to-rent tenants, but on Pro, you can actually zoom into the feedback in specific buildings and specific brands. And we were presenting this to Long Harbour, who have Way of Life. They've got the Gessner and the Cecil. And James Ormere at Long Harbour saw that actually his residents cared more about recycling than even the build-to-rent average. And his answer to that is, why don't we have a turbocharged recycling room on site so people can recycle their food waste, their glass, their cardboard, their cans properly, and then market that? And I think that's the thing, one thing I would take out from your research, Dan, about, it's a deal breaker around the landlord or a building having sustainable credentials or a sustainable approach. Well, there's really easy wins to do that for residents. So that's the last time I'm going to get up and present this, because it's a bit of a nightmare go back and forth. But that all of that data is actually going to be coming up in our sustainability report, which is out on the 22nd of November, and it's free to download, so you guys can download it.
I'll be downloading it.
Well, it's good to see your views, your feedback is giving us the same answer. The ESG is important. It's important to our customers. And you've outlined there which levels of importance, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
Moving on to another aspect, which is around technology, the use of technology and within buildings, and there's a lot talked about that, in terms of systems that we have and apps and automation. But a question to you, what's more important within a building? Is it the technology or is it the people?
So I think if I was going to start on that, they're both equally important. Obviously, coming from a tech provider's perspective, I'm going to tell you, technology is there. Absolutely, you should have resident portals. You should streamline your back office operations. But I think we all know that people tend to make the difference, and actually the two can work side by side together. So you can enable your people to have the free time to better serve your communities and your residents, provided that you've got your back office in order, provided that you're having the right digital strategy. I mean, in our research, we found that 2/3 of tenants prefer their communications digitally, so be that through WhatsApp, be that through resident portals, the sort of different breakdowns of that. And I think actually the highest rated individual channel was WhatsApp and SMS. But again, that's still interacting with a person. It's not interacting with a piece of software. I don't know if you find.
Yeah, I mean, I was on a panel a few weeks ago at the Movers and Shakers. So I shouldn't mention that here, should I? We're the UK conference today. But I was on a panel a few weeks ago, and there was the comment was sort of death by data, death by tech. There's so much. Amanda and Richard are sitting here and probably get so many opportunities to integrate with tech. A resident portal and a resident app clearly has an impact on the resident experience. It comes through in our reviews all the time, but it is about the people. That tech needs to facilitate the building managers doing what they do best, interacting with the customers and providing that level of service, which is what sets build to rent apart. So for us, we would say it's really about the people first and foremost, but the tech can make that person's job easier. And I mean, going back to that sustainability point, there is a feature in, I think, one of the motor buildings, it might be in Edinburgh, that tells the resident where their energy consumption level is in relation to the rest of the residents on site, and actually that's tech having an impact on behaviour. You know, because if you're conscious of that and you're like, oh, I will turn those lights out, I won't have the window open and the heating blazing. So I think tech's going to provide a huge part in making buildings more efficient and also giving the managers and the operators on the ground the time to be face to face, and that's the balance. I think getting that balance right is key. But to your point about WhatsApp, I think you know, WhatsApp is, we use it every single day. It's the easiest way to communicate. You can use it with your friends, and actually we've seen a lot of building managers who do use WhatsApp to communicate with their residents, and I don't know, I think a challenge to maybe the tech providers and portals is to integrate WhatsApp within their offer. I'm not sure if MRI do or will, but that's something.
Our product manager's in the front row.
Okay, well there we go.
You can submit that to him.
But I think something, that familiarity and...
It is interesting, especially if you're taking an omni-portal approach, an omni-channel approach, having it in one single experience for the resident is really important. So we heard years ago the horror stories where people would go to a development and there'd be one app for dry cleaning, one app to pay your rent, one app to log your maintenance request. And it's very important that you have that in one place for the residents to access, so it's an easier journey as possible for them. And then also we see a constant tug of war between the design side of that and the operational side of that, because there are certain operators that are very brand conscious, very much think about what does that design look like, and sometimes the operational aspect of it can get a little bit lost in there. And it's just finding that perfect midway where you've actually got a portal that can allow the residents to self-serve, to do what they need to, get the information that they need to, but that also captivates them. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do.
Rory, you and I have talked about this, and I've heard you speak about how people really have an impact on the resident experience, and in fact, the developments that and the operations that have the best ratings tend to have outstanding people. Could you just illustrate a bit more about how important you see people and how in terms of on-site and improving the customer experience?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's firstly, it's central as to what differentiates build to rent from being a tenant in other buildings, right? There are no other buildings, even with new build, that have concierge on site, which a lot of new build do, particularly in London. The sense of community, that person knowing your name and asking how you are and integrating you into that community and being that point of contact when something goes wrong, and it's really, it has formed the core of what the build to rent offer to date. So I can't understate how important it is. And often the top-rated buildings on home views, the amount of times that the building managers get mentioned personally, it's time and time again. And that's brilliant. Actually, at our awards next year, we're going to have a award for the building managers. And one of the metrics that we're measuring is the number of times their names are mentioned in reviews, positively and negatively. It can work both ways. So I don't think you can kind of overstate the importance of people enough. I suppose the challenge for build to rent, as we're moving in, and the session before this was talking about build to rent outside of core cities and the regions, is like, can you make build to rent stack up with this level of service and this face to face in the regions, and what's the with affordable build to rent with a little a rather than true affordable, but and what's that marriage between people and tech, and how, and can and we're not, I always get my kind of head bitten off when I mention this at conferences, is that I'm not saying that tech can replace people, but if you can minimise the time that you need for that person on site to have that face to face, to create that relationship, and replace some of it with tech, then it might actually mean that we can offer build to rent and that service in a much wider locations across the UK, which can only be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot today across conference about skills, qualifications, and the like. To your point there, recruiting enough people in and making sure that they are up to speed and qualified can only happen, I guess, if the tech is supporting that.
Absolutely. And also understanding where that person, that face-to-face contact really has an impact, and then making sure that that person on site has the time and the bandwidth to deliver that is key.
Yeah, I suppose to finish that off from a tech perspective there, it's just looking at how you can instill repeatable processes that are auditable, that you can bring a new staff member in, operate on a system and operate the same level across different properties, operate at scale if you're building out a larger portfolio. And again, a lot of that comes from investing in those core back office processes of maintenance, billing, credit control, how you deal with all of your supplier payments, and bringing that into one place so that core piece is being ran as neatly as possible.
Yeah, we won't mention your phone there.
Sorry,
You're looking,
I didn't realise there was a
you
hole
are
in
Rory
the
in
seat.
tech. Yeah. Just moving on. Thanks. That's really good insights there, actually. And we'll come to questions at the end, which I'm sure we'll have time for. Third area I just wanted to cover is around location.
Yeah.
And what you're seeing from research and feedback about where people currently live and where they would like to live. And are there differences there? Firstly, I mean, Dan, maybe if you could give some feedback on city centre versus suburban.
Yeah, so I think this is where we broke down our categories in a slightly different way that probably disagree a little bit with, well, disagrees to an extent with your reviews, but actually follows the general trend. We had city, small town, suburban and rural, and the first three, the tenant satisfaction in all of those properties was around 50%, said they were satisfied with that. But then rural was about 80%. But that also correlates quite highly with the fact that only 20% of people that lived in a flat were happy with that and ideally wanted a house. So there's just a general shift from people who are living in smaller properties in urban areas, obviously eventually want to buy, eventually want to move out to suburban areas with more room and be in that space. And generally they are more content when they're in those rural areas. And we were talking about this earlier, weren't we? Is there an element actually that when you're in those rural areas, the expectation is a little bit lower than maybe what you have in a city area? It's not as expensive, so therefore, in a city area, you're paying a higher rent, you expect more from it, so you might be more likely to be potentially dissatisfied.
I think it comes down to affordability based on the data that we took. We just published the location report with Rightmove in September, where we correlated. So one of the ratings we ask on home views is you rate the location, and we also ask what do you like and dislike about your local area. So it's kind of separate to your building, and we correlated that with Rightmove's rental index and house price index. And one thing was really interesting. So Edinburgh was number one last year, has actually dropped down, I think it was to 8th, Grace, I think somewhere like that. But it had the highest rental increase in the last year. A lot of that is because of the legislation that's come in. So landlords have been pushing the rents to get ahead of the curve on the rent cap. But it's had a material impact on how people feel about where they live, because suddenly it's really it's still a great place to live, but it's expensive. And that's one of the reasons why we've always seen London lag behind the regions in location ratings. And that was really came to a crescendo in COVID, and actually London has recovered a little bit since then. But what we see is people are moving much further away to find somewhere they can afford to live. And that's obviously facilitated by infrastructure, but it's also now in build to rent facilitated by the fact you can get build to rent in Milton Keynes, in Reading, in Kent, in Sevenoaks, all around London. So if you're moving out of London, and also you can work there because you can work flexibly. So the top rated, and you can see this in the location report, the top rated city for the data over the last year, well, city and county, was Aberdeenshire, which only has a few build to rent schemes. Obviously our data is not just build to rent, it's new homes in general. But a lot of that was down to the fact the quality of life people have there. They live in the centre of the city, they're paying very affordable rents, they've got really good products. I'm going to forget the scheme that's in there, I'll kick myself later. But but that is the key, and it's no surprise. We're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. So if you're delivering a great experience at an affordable level, people see a huge amount of value in that. So yeah, I mean, very, very exciting to see how single family as well moves that sort of rental experience with a professional landlord, institutionally owned, into even further parts of the UK.
Yeah, I mean, it's really encouraging to see your research backing that up. There is a real resident consumer drive to want more single family outside of the cities, and which obviously we've had sessions this morning about the need to drive the delivery of high quality single family.
I mean, just anecdotally, we've got quite a lot of data on single family already, a lot of reviews. And if you look at a house, it's a Simple Life example, a house managed by Simple Life that was built by Countryside on one side of the cul-de-sac, and then the owner in the Countryside house that actually bought from that same developer, the difference in satisfaction is around 25%, 30%, which is the similar metric we saw in London when you compare a new home's sort of buy-to-let occupier or owner to a build-to-rent tenant. So I think single family, although the ratings are slightly lower than build-to-rent, it obviously doesn't have all the amenity, etc. But the differential in sort of owning or living in a sort of non-build-to-rent product or single-family product was mirrored in that single-family market. So
is that down to expectation that because of owning a home, you have higher expectations?
I think owning a home, you have a lot more complications. You've got delay in delivery, you haven't had a professional snag, often you have all the issues that you may face with, the snag, the customer service and the delays. And this isn't, every single house builder, but that is, common themes that we see that has a material impact on how you view your home. When you move into a single family home, you don't have any of that. You move into a home that's been professionally snagged, that is, when anything goes wrong, you pick up the phone, it's dealt with immediately. That isn't always the experience that people have in a build-to-sell.
Rory could sell build-to-rent to anyone, I think. Open to questions. Have you got any questions, please? I think there's a roving mic.
It's the graveyard shift.
They really do want those drinks, don't they? Oh, there's one here. Thank you. Thank you.
Interesting to hear your views on how important face-to-face communication is, in particular in terms of the multi-family build-to-rents. It'd be interesting to hear your view on what good customer and operating management team looks like in single family. Obviously, the tech helps with management of development, but actually face-to-face contact could be less or could be more challenging.
Yeah. So it definitely is more challenging because you don't have the amenity space and the offering and the density that you have within a multifamily. But so we work collaboratively now with brands like Simple Life, Place First, Leave Living, and others, all that have quite large. I mean, Simple Life obviously is the largest single-family housing portfolio, and I think when you read the reviews, what people really value in terms of that, I suppose face-to-face is that repairs and maintenance offer that is on site or with you within the day or within a certain time frame, which obviously you wouldn't get in a normal living in a sort of new home housing estate. So there's that. I think the tech really, or the portal and that communication that's facilitated by the portal becomes much more important in single family because it is your kind of main channel of communication. But I think what you can still do as an operator, and what Simple Life do, and all the operators we work with Place First, is curate the community. It's not just about the face-to-face that you can create with a manager. It's actually the face-to-face or the community you can create within all of your neighbourhood, and that's very unique. You don't know. So what we see is we see a lot of like running clubs, kids clubs, dog walking clubs. Suddenly, then everyone gets to know their neighbours, which is probably more typical in a housing estate than it would be an apartment block. But they really galvanise it, and then they make friends, they stay for longer, and it has a positive impact on how your scheme will be valued, your churn. So I think in single family, from the initial data that we've got, is that tech can really help you create that level of comms and efficiency. Those kind of like, if you are lucky enough, I mean, we're going to have present-made coming soon, which is going to be sort of the highly amenitized version of single family, where you are going to have centralized facilities that will be quite different from a lot of the product we've got at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, I think that galvanizing that community and introducing them to each other and setting that up is a great way of kind of providing that sense of like safety and belonging, which is effectively what a great building manager also does themselves.
The one bit I'd add to there as well is from a software supplier perspective is making sure you've got the ability in your customer portal to foster that community, because often that bit gets missed. And like we've got a forum, for example, in our residence portal, which depending on the person we speak to will be asked immediately, can that be switched off, because I don't want my residents to speak to each other, right the way through to, wow, this is brilliant, this is exactly what we want, we need people to be interacting from day one. Because if you don't have it in your portal, they'll do it on WhatsApp or in some sort of closed group, and it's better that you're in that conversation than not.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
makes sense.
So we're almost there. As you know, we're looking for actions out of every session. So while you're sort of thinking about that, what key actions you know? Just to summarise, actually before I do that, Dan, how can people see your research?
It's on our website, I believe. I'll get a link sent round to
That'd
the
be
UKA to share.
Absolutely, because it's some valuable insights.
Yeah.
And Rory, from your point of view, your research and your
So the location, you can go on to the Home Views Business Hub and you can download all of our reports. You can also sign up to the sustainability webinar on our LinkedIn.
That's right. I thought I'd give you a chance for a plug,
Thank you very much.
plug there. So I picked up a couple of themes. One is the challenge to tech providers in particular to integrate WhatsApp into your platforms, for example, and the need for auditable services and repeatable services and levels of service to ease upskilling and inductions, for example. What would you say are the key actions that the sector needs to take forward to learn from the insights that you've garnered?
I'd love to pick up the sustainability point, and I think that we need to better educate the residents of, you know, what environmental ratings really mean, and if a building is built highly sustainably or is particularly efficient, then let's communicate that at the point of move-in. Let's make it part of the education, and then I think if we do that successfully, you might even start seeing a premium. Yeah. Or even people choosing, you know, that building over this building because it does have those green credentials. But I think some brands are really good at doing that, and but I think a lot more work is needed, because clearly our data shows people care about what they feel and touch, and they're not really getting that for the other big impacts of sustainability that we collectively need to do if we're going to get to that target.
I suppose without just saying buy MRI, my advice would be to make sure, I'd go for the people perspective actually. So, you know, it's a given that you can go out there and procure a resident portal. But what I see time and time again in build to sell, so the sort of leasehold block management world, in build to rent, is overworked teams who are unable to serve their residents or clients as well as they'd like to because their system processes are inefficient. So the takeaway there would be maximising operational efficiency to free up your people to be able to deliver the best service.
Fantastic. Thank you.